do. I went to school. I went to university. I was good. I didn't do drugs. I did everything I could, but I have no job. That's the injustice of it all. That's where the wrong is. So I told you about people calling me for problems. We got a call, Pumi is my colleague, to say we don't have water in a village in Nyanyat. My God, I've never put a tap in my life. But I came back to Joburg, we went and saw there, and one of the things we saw is that the nearest tap is 1.6 kilometers away from the community. It takes the kids 3 hours to go fetch water. They only do their washing once because they can only carry 5 liters of water at a time. So if you're going to accumulate that so you can do your washing on Wednesdays, they don't wear white shirts because they do their washing once a week. Now we know when a team is moving, it can only be as fast as the slowest person in the team. Otherwise it breaks. It breaks it into parts. Now, when we've got people who are that left behind, while their counterparts in Johannesburg with Wi-Fi are on the internet going to the 4th Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
You know the sad thing, I went to buy, my daughter and I went to buy a washing machine not so long ago. Initially, before I bought the machine, I would have said we're creating a pool of domestics, but actually we're not, because you've got to be literate now to run a washing machine because of the different fabrics that are being used. You've got to read the thing. This, that, and the other, the new machines. Some of them even have sensors of what kind of material it is and how it should be used. Now, unless we solve those fundamental problems, we're just lying to ourselves. And we're going to be in deeper trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, Somalia invented the post office. That's how far advanced they were. Iran, Persia, and Somalia, they invented the post office. Where are they? Their kids are scattered all over the world and being chased as foreigners. That's what's going to happen to you. And I have bad news for you. The bad news is that only you can do it and no one else. When we were kids, we had to learn, we very quickly learned that the white police couldn't read. So when we were going to activists, you have to take the Bible or a church song. You were in trouble if you came across the soldiers, because the soldiers were mostly conscripts, so they could read to say, well, these are political books that you're carrying. The others just said, no, it's just, it's a hymn, Things were so bad that nobody ever uttered the word ANC. We used to say enk or peck. Because if the police heard you utter the word ANC, you were in jail. But only we could do it. No one else. The bad news is, guys, if you want a South Africa that was slightly more prosperous than when I grew up, I started working very quickly. I was able to buy a house. Pumi, I think you bought your house at 23. Who is 25 years old here? Raise your hand if you own your whole house. The economy is dying. And if you can't make money in your youth, how are you going to retire? Guys, we are in trouble. And we've got to stop glossing it over. Thank you.
I'm glad you ended with that propagation, Musi, because that's what I want to throw to the floor, and I'm going to come to you first. But I want to provoke us on this. It's come from this room, even though it is my passion. So people always say that I have a bias towards the subject. But I think we do need to interrogate our relationship to youth and youth development in this country. I've been a youth activist and advocate for the last 20 years. And I can tell you that we are not doing what we need to in terms of youth development. And if you are right, and I think you are, and I think you mentioned it as well, that our greatest asset in this country is people. 66% of us in this country are below the age of 35. 66% of us are below the age of 35. Yet the people who lead us are twice that age. 66% of us are below the age of 35, and 50% of those people are unemployed. And then we wonder why our economy is struggling. It's because human beings create value. A young man from Diepkloof, who's part of a political theater process that we've been doing at our organization, stood up and said to us in a public meeting 2 weeks ago, he said, people make money, money doesn't make people. And so we must start investing in people, and if the majority of the people in this country are below the age of 35, why are we struggling with the idea of youth development, youth leadership, and making sure we create space for young people? I have said unequivocally many times on many platforms 2 things about young people. And I want to really put this into the room because I think it's come up in many ways in this conversation and ask you these questions directly. But I've said 2 things. One is that as somebody who's no longer youth, and I know I look 14, but I'm not. But for somebody who's no longer youth, I regard my generational mission as lending my social, political, and economic capital to young people, to make space for them. Older generations said to me while I was youth that because apartheid ate their youth, they would eat mine. And they effectively did. And I refuse to eat the youth of the next generation of people, which means I'm willing to be led by young people. I'm willing to put my ex next to a 25-year-old president, if I can find one. But we're going to have to grapple with what are we willing to do to create space for the 66% of people in this country who are young, even if it means it comes at our own expense. And so I throw that into the room as part of the provocations, is what do you see as the future when it comes to engaging the people of South Africa, and particularly its youth? So I'm going to take a round of provocations. I'll start with you, and then I'll go here and then there, if you don't
So
mind.
Tessa, since I've got the mic,
Can I start it because
I was the last person in the last round.
Oh, I didn't see you.
Yeah, that's okay.
At all. Okay.
That's why I'm holding the mic.
Okay. Great.
To make sure that I don't miss this chance.
Gotcha.
I'm supposed to stand up. My name is Pumi, and just a disclaimer, I do work with Muzi. So the question is not for the panel per se, but I think it's more for all of us. South Africans, we are very optimistic. Even from the research, what we hear is we hear people want to do things, people believe, people are cheerleaders and all of that. But I think what we don't do as South Africans is we don't consider what it is we are willing to sacrifice. And opportunities to make the South Africa we want to become a reality. So I'd just like to say to everybody, even as you walk out of here, what are you willing to sacrifice to make it a reality? Now it can go back to the...
Thank you for insisting. I did miss that in the last round, and I apologize.
Good morning. My name is Veli Mtiani. And let me put a bit of a disclaimer. I'm a media practitioner with SABC News. But I've not read the findings of the report, but I've listened to some of the highlights. I've got not necessarily a different take, but I've got points to note. If we look at South Africa as a brand, but I think we need to look who is South Africa and what brand we want to take out there. In the words of former President Thabo Mbeki, he stated that South Africa is inevitable 2 worlds in one. There is the better world, which is the first world of South Africa, and there's also a third world, which is the poor world of South Africa. And unfortunately, the majority of the people in this country, they belong to the second world, which is the poor world. So if we want to look into the brand and want to take this brand out there, we need to be able to look into, we are taking the brand for the first world, where there are opportunities, there is access, and there is social mobility. And on the other world, we're looking at the developing world, the poor world, where there are no resources, and people are poor, and there's little to go by for the day. So to brand South Africa, this is my challenge. If you are building or you're the custodian of brand South Africa, do you look into who you want to describe as a brand? Because inevitable, if you take South Africa as a brand, it will always be this country with opportunities, the richest, the most industrialized economy in Africa, top universities, good state institutions, and good constitution, all well and good. Then you go to the other part. Majority of those people are very poor. Majority of those people are illiterate. Majority of those people, they drop out from school. Majority of those people, according to recent statistics by the World Bank, South Africa is still the most unequal society in the world, be it economically, be it in wealth, be it in income, be it in digital skills gap or digital literacy. So in all sorts of inequalities you find in South Africa, and majority of that. Then now, second part, if you are looking as a custodian of the brand, you need to be able to identify where are the challenges that we have as this brand, South Africa. Most of the challenges that this country has are not necessarily your economy per se. It's the issue of how do you allow other people to participate in that economy. What we cannot run away from is that apartheid as it is, it was not necessarily about whether, maybe it was to a certain extent about white or black and whatever, but it was also more economical. We need to own means of production, we need to take land. If we feel that a particular space will use better, move aside, we squash you somewhere, then we take that. So it was more economical. And without going back and re-looking into that, how do we open the door for this second part of South Africa, which is the poor, to be able to participate meaningfully? The brand will always be superficial. It will be South Africa. I was privileged to attend the past investment conference, and you know when the CEOs they were speaking, the optimism, the way they are so willing to put the money into this country. I mean, I questioned myself with all my pessimism. Am I okay? Why am I feeling like this? Because the guys there see so much potential. Everything is well with this country. Guys, stop the negative narrative about the country. So many opportunities. And I started to look, my goodness, seriously, there are many opportunities. Maybe it's me. But I then clicked where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a community where we never had water. Whenever I go home, I sometimes need to hire a car because the car I'm driving cannot cope with the terrain of where I need to be. I still see a lot of people by the corners. Some of them, you may think they've lost their minds. It's because they've dropped out of school. They could not get support. That's the South Africa. That's the majority of South Africa. If we talk about South Africa as a country, we talk about the infrastructure that we have for which part of the world? Because in rural areas, schools cannot even cross the small stream, not even a river, the small stream, to go to school. If it's heavily raining, they have to stay at home and wait for that stream to subside, and then they can cross over. So as a brand, we need to start looking into what challenges this country is facing and gravitate towards bringing government into the realities of, well, it's good we've got infrastructure in South Africa. One of the friends, when I was still at university, one of the things that they would say when they're coming to South Africa from other African countries, said, guys, you've got almost everything that we wish we have in our countries where we're coming from. So let's leverage on that. Let's bring people who are on the other side as part of building the brand. I wonder if maybe there's been a study commissioned to the rural areas, poor areas, where the brand South Africa is going to get the perspectives of the people who feel disgruntled and who feel they are excluded from economic participation. For me, the brand cannot only resonate with those who have, and those who have not cannot identify with the brand. There are people who live in South Africa. What are we talking about good infrastructure? We don't have it. What are we talking about money? We don't have it, because they can struggle to put bread on the table. I beg to differ a little bit with Baba Muzi. I do believe that there is hope in South Africa, and we just need the change in how the economy is set up. Without changing how the economy is set up, then we are doomed to fail. If we can change that, I mean, even the kind of jobs we're talking about, everyone talks about job creation, but no one has sat down and said, What kind of industries are we investing in that are labor intensive, that are labor absorbing? But everyone is talking about fourth industrial revolution. It's well and good, but we know its adverse effects is that it will not create as many jobs as we look into. Actually, it will limit, because what 10 people could do with fourth industrial revolution, we need 2. So while we clap hands about moving towards that direction, but we need to look what kind of socio-economic disadvantages we're leaving behind. That's my views.
Thank you. I've been actually a little naughty as the facilitator. I was given an instruction to ask people, over there, to ask people who speak to please stand up and come a bit to the front so the camera can catch you. Now you've not been caught. All of those great insights, and we only heard your voice. But thank you for that. I'm gonna, in the spirit of Muzi, be disruptive of myself. and say to you that what's always stunned me about traveling across the continent is people who say to me, they don't understand why South Africans are always protesting when they have so much. We're like, why are you guys angry? And I'm like, guys, we have every reason to be angry because there are people who live in Alexandra and look at Sandton and wonder why it can't be them. It's one thing to live in a context where the majority of people are at the same living standard as you and we're all hustling together. It's another thing to be in the most unequal country in the world and watch people live an extraordinarily different life where they can spend 5,000 Rand on a dinner and you're trying to get 400 Rand to pay rent. It can make us angry, and it does make us angry because we must reckon with the fact that it's 2 brand South Africas we need to talk about at minimum. So I think that's a really important point I think we need to hone in on as we take this conversation forward.
Thank you.
Please stand and yeah, just so that I'm not scolded again.
As we said to the mayoress, stand up when you speak to us.
Thank you. My name is Bongi Ngobo. I'm from Trade, Industry and Competition. But I need to put out a disclaimer. The following comments are my own views and not those of the trade and industry. I am triggered by the concept of collective purpose, particularly because I wonder, do we have a solid foundation that will get us there? I despise BEE because I think whatever wins or successes it might have had, in my view, were never sustainable because it did not teach me how to fish but gave me a fish. And other people may believe it opened the door. Granted, that may be correct, but the door completely shuts as soon as you get in. And you must look for another door, and then the cycle keeps going on over and over and over again. I think our society is suffering from a poverty mentality. And this is not limiting this to food issue. It has nothing to do with that, but resources at large. So we're talking of a people that have a poverty mentality, that the resources that have been made available for you, and that includes opportunities that are supposed to empower you and get you to the next level, or an equal playing field with our other group of people. And that does not happen because you know why? Because you don't trust the system, you don't believe that those resources and opportunities are really truly there for you, and that if you don't take all of them today, right now, and chow the money, like the corruption we've seen, we've lived through it, and chow the money as much as you can, as fast as you possibly can, today, because you don't know that tomorrow it will still be there. And that is the poverty mentality. So it doesn't matter how many opportunities and resources may be made available, but until we go back to the drawing board and address that mentality, there is going to be 1 or 2 or 3 or 100 people that will squander those opportunities and that will want to take as many as possible, as fast as it is possible. And unfortunately, end up not even utilizing them for longevity to have anything sustainable in their lives, because the poverty mentality is that I don't truly believe that there is enough for all of us. Therefore, let me take as much as I can, as fast as it is possible, just so it is not there tomorrow. Then at least I have something for myself. And that triggers me, because how do we get to the collective purpose then, as a people, as a nation? You know, when we still have to now deal with those, and those are the realities of the measure of success. It varies from one person to the next. And therefore, collective purpose, what is it going to take for us to get to that platform, to get to that state of mind also? Because the measure of success differs from one person to the next in South Africa. And that is, unfortunately, the status quo. And therefore, what is collective purpose then, I ask?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. We have one more. Would you please step forward so that you can be... I'm sorry, it's not my fault. I'm just following instructions.
Sanbonani, good
Yeah.
morning, everyone. My name is Mkolisi Pire from Generation Amog, which is led by our young cheerleader here, Esther Padi. So my main concern is most of the concerns that were raised here. And let me start by saying brand SA, I think brand SA, you know, the word brand, it's very important. Now, what is the image of South Africa? Let me start by the churches. You know, before we used to go to churches knowing that we'll be taken care of spiritually and socially. Now you have pastors that have big congregation just to help themselves, where you would find even an usher with their torn clothes and all that, meaning they don't give back. And that's an image that one, if they admire a pastor or someone, they would follow through those trends. Now, going down to politics, it's even worse, which is something that we raised just now. In South Africa, we are afraid to sacrifice, like you raised earlier on. You look at Americans, you look at UK, they sacrifice and they invest in their own image. You will never watch a movie or a series, I bet you now, in America and not see a South African flag. It will never happen. American flag, yeah. You know? It's always there, one way or another. And you look at South Africa, we hardly embrace our own South African flag. You know, I'm glad he's wearing South African socks. I was going to applaud you for that. Yes, yeah, because we are too quick to wear American flag in South Africa and walk around as if, you know, bold and proudly. I can't even go to the labels that are internationally made, but we are too slow to support our own people, very slow. And the whole point of that is because of the image that we are not investing in. I mean, SAPC is more looking forward to make profit, I will put it that way, rather than investing to the community and taking care of the local productions, making sure that they push local content, they push local creatives in terms of clothing and other aspects or other sectors like that, advertise, market them, push them. Let's push a certain image. Instead, when we see things in the media, mostly it's negative things. You know, when you talk to people outside of South Africa or when you go outside of South African borders, we are known with being abusers, xenophobic, you name all this, that's how we are perceived as South Africa. We are not seen as a rainbow nation anymore or the country that is fighting forward. It all boils down to the image that we must create together, because at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, we can start thousand operation to do us. It won't really help us because we are not doing it the right way, about it the right way, you know. we're still going to fight amongst this ourselves, because now how do you identify Mosotho, or Mosotho or Mosotho South Africa, and all those kind of things, which is still going to open up a whole lot of room of blood pool, you know, and necessary. So I mean, a guy was stabbed just for speaking Tsonga, and they assumed that he's coming from Maputo when he was a South African. So it tells you the kind of the anger that we have, that we are not directing or talking about it correctly. Instead, we are endorsing wrong things. The most important thing is the sacrifice, like she said, and the image that we need to create. Because even if you were to go to social media or TikTok and whatsoever, you look at China, you'll never see China's twerking and all these going naked and all. But you look at South Africans, you know, women are always half naked, if not naked at all, for the likes. Now, that's an image that we are portraying. What are we following? What are we getting there? There's no engineering there. How are we going to get to that fourth industrial revolution? And you know, we won't get there anytime soon, which is still a huge issue, because even now, it's still a huge gap. I mean, we're working with the people on the ground from the townships, where really this kind of, you can see that we are heading for disaster if we're going to be embracing this fourth revolution thing. And because, I mean, there's no jobs, people are lack information, and yet we are pushed with these naked women all the time. It's a trend that is happening. That means the information that we're supposed to be receiving is not coming the right way. So I think as a collective, it's high time we start that society that he was talking about, starting from this kind of a group. So in a slow, but it's commission, right? They call it commissions. So we need to start really having commissions, because people were talking passionately. Let's see this passion coming together, because we need to build quality. Quality can build something concrete. We don't need quantity, we just need quality people to lead and to take action and sacrifice, and for us to have proper solutions. That way we will be able to inspire and drive the right message towards the whole country. That way we'll be able to conquer a whole lot of things and push the right image for this country and educate our people with the right opportunities. Because it's pointless to talk about the opportunities when I don't even dream and I don't know what is my purpose of living in life. What I see, it's Nyaope, I see naked women, I see people walking around with bottles of beer. That's what I think that's been cool, and I'm 5 years old. By the time I get to my teens, I have no ambition at all in life, you know, because even this kind of events, they happen in these kind of places. Sentence, they never go to townships or the rural areas. If they go there, it's in a, you know, it's addressed in Mpunga. There's no order. It's like it's a comrade thing, or we are there to do about the ESCOM. The issues are not addressed correctly, and all those kind of things, you know. So let us try to push the right image together. You know, I think maybe our chair, when she said the panel, how far are you willing to go to come together and for us to push a certain drive, which is what was raised by the lady there to say, the panel, how not only the panel but everyone, the sacrifice. Are we willing to sacrifice and come together and not follow an individual or someone speaks nicely, but to follow an idea? Because it's important. We always follow people instead of an idea, you know, which is misleading, honestly speaking, because the person can change tomorrow. No, what I was saying, actually, comrade, it was preposterous. You know, I was saying that because, you know, trying to address it politically, and then, all right. You know, no, let's stop that. Let's try to follow an ideology as South Africans so that we can build a better South African for all. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anyone else from the floor who wanted to engage in this round? Please pass the mic down. While we pass the mic down, just to prepare the panel for my next question. My next question is going to be what the last question was, and the question that the chair raised as well. And I'm going to ask you to speak about what can be done and what we can do to support active citizens, especially as people hold any kind of position of influence or privilege. And so that's kind of what I come back to the panel with.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Darren, and I work for Proudly South African, which is a cousin of Brand SA. British by birth, but South African by choice. Took my citizenship, and I'm very proud to be South African. But it seems to me that you know, one of the fundamental issues and our message as Proudly South African is with the Buy Local advocacy campaign. But there's a fundamental mistrust by South Africans in their own products. we only kind of endorse our products when Beyonce has worn it, or Oprah's worn it, or it's been seen overseas. And people don't have any faith in the quality, the value for money of local products. So it's great to hear people say, I support local, but it really is, it's a challenge for Proudly South African to get people to support their own and to buy, and from young entrepreneurs. You see some guys now doing amazing work, like Tipple the Jean Maker, Drip, Takis. There's some amazing young entrepreneurs doing great work, and they're being, I think, embraced now. But there's a lot of young entrepreneurs that are not being celebrated by our own. So that lack of faith in ourselves is at the bottom of a lot of the issues that South Africa has.
Yeah. I mean, I would probably add to that as part of this conversation about migration. One of the conversations we probably need to have a bit more about that is, why people are not buying from local spaza shops even. Somebody said, well, there aren't any. I can tell you for a fact there are. I mean, we were able to find thousands in a project we were doing recently. But I think there's a lot to be said about not only, what it takes to build our confidence in ourselves and in confidence in each other, but also what it takes to become competitive, One of the things the migration question throws up for us is, are we willing to compete and win in our own country? We have home ground advantage. If we think about the informal economy, we have home ground advantage, we have cultural advantage, we have social capital advantage, and we're being, in many ways, we lose the battle at not being organized enough, or not, using our Stokvel tendencies to be able to buy together and bulk buy, and so how do we start to invest in that ourselves so that we reap that value and reward? And I think it goes to exactly that question as well. So I'm coming back to the panel, and Muzi, I'm going to start with you on your reflections on anything that's come up, and my question about what can we actively start to do to bring change.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tessa. I always say economics and education.
Muzi, is your mic on?
Yes, it is. This Michael Jackson mic doesn't always work.
I mean, your voice is loud enough.
Okay, but yes, okay. Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's a little better. Yes, thank you.
So, education and economics are like staple food. They've got to be homegrown. If you come from KZN, you know that maize is sweeter there by the time it gets to Joe, because it doesn't travel well.
Yeah.
And when we go to other countries to look at the economics and try to make them work here, they don't work, because often one of the most important things is culture.
Yes.
How people work, how they relate in that particular country. So the problem is, there's a book I read when America went into serious trouble, having problems like we do. They said the greatest problem that America had was that people had taken leave from thinking. They'd stopped thinking and took the easiest solutions. Instead of thinking that this is what our problems are and this is how we're going to deal with our problems. So after there was the looting, the violence in KZN and the rest of in Johannesburg last year, we went in the organization South Africa's Promise, we went to Pietermaritzburg to see how we could help. And so when we were there, the first thing we pulled out was the statistics of the area. They don't report youth unemployment anymore. But also what was quite interesting, or what was very sad, was that 65% or 60% of the population in Maritzburg don't have matric. So even if you were to put up a factory tomorrow, 60% will not be able to work, and only 14% have got a post-matric qualification. And Pietermaritzburg is in a better position because the rest of the country is at 65%. So when you have a solution, when you have to think about how we're going to solve that problem, you've got to think about the now. So one of the biggest employers in the world right now is Fourth Industrial Revolution, but these machines have to be taught. A friend of mine who runs a big social media company told me that they hired 10,000 people recently around the world. And they do nothing serious, nothing. All they do is they take a picture, scan it, and look at another picture and say, this looks the same. One of the guys who's leaving the country was Tembiso. His job, they get videos from tennis players, and they look, he used a forehand, he used a backhand, and then every time they tick, and then they send those stats back to the US. He's got a job. Now, those are the new things that I'm talking about, and all we're interested in is in mining and all that kind of thing, whereas mining only is 9% of our GDP. So the world is changing, and we know we can do those things better. So one of the problems that they're solving, I've got a camera. It's an old camera. It's supposed to read my eye and then read where my eye is looking. It focuses. It's a fourth industrial revolution camera. It's pretty old now because there are newer ones now. But when I take a black bird next to a white bird, it does not see the black bird. It always follows the white bird. Why? Because the people who program them are white people.
Yep.
But if we now start creating those employments, and those kids can work in, when I say kids, because I'm old, is they can be in Soweto, they can be in Katlehong, they can be anywhere without going to factories. And they can do the job for the rest of the world. Because once that is done, the technology has been done, it gets sold to cameras. You know the new cameras, you actually program the face of the person, and the camera can follow the face of the person throughout the game. It focuses on the face. That person will never be out of focus. Somebody has to teach the machine that. That's what fourth industrial revolution is about, the teaching of the machines. Now, those are new opportunities that are available. Now, the one issue I want to address is the brand issue. You know, a brand, guys, and I've worked with brands. What is a brand? A brand is an image, isn't it? What is image in Zulu or in Sotho? It's tunes, siriti, right? When you walk away, it follows you, but you can't catch it.
Yeah.
So don't focus on the image, focus on the character. Because once you fix the character, the image will follow you. I've seen clients try to do that. It's a waste of money. If we do transactional thing, the flag, follow the flag. So what was it?
The traveling flag.
So, traveling flag. Where suddenly a kid who used to, we've done, and this answers the question, what we've done in Nyanyadi, and we're going to be doing in other places, is if suddenly they're able to have water and they're able to plant. There was a friend of ours who was showing us that you don't need land, huge land to plant food. But once people have got benefits from their own country, then they're able to live and have a salary and have dignity. Then all of those things, the image, will get taken care of on its own. Thank you.
Nice. George?
Thank you. Well, where to start? So, I think it's true what you say, that the brand is something that you've got to try to catch, but it's not possible to catch it. The lady with the Coca-Cola shirt has just left. But what is Coca-Cola? Coca-Cola, the reason why we buy Coca-Cola is because we've got products, and it tastes in a certain way, and it's promoted in a certain way. And that is how we think about it. South Africa is certain things that are fundamental to South Africa, changing these 10 groups, but that is what we are. And some of it is good, some of it is bad. But that is what the brand is. A positive brand sometimes, a negative brand. In some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad, but that is what we have. That can be adapted and changed and fixed. Now the question is, it was a practical question, how do we physically do it? I'm a professor at a university, and from the time that I began in academia in 2000, was it 2003 or was it 1993? I can't even remember. 2003, I think. I've seen a big change, and what's happened is I get postgraduate students who come in, and a lot of these postgraduate students who are doing masters and doctoral studies do okay work. Some of them do very good work irrespective of backgrounds. So, but they're the minority. And what is it that makes them successful? And I'm imagining that this is the case in South Africa. It relates to what the economist Ricardo Hausmann says. You've got to learn to do small things, and you've got to learn to do small things in a group with other people. And it's a simple thing initially, and the economy grows like that. My students' success grows like that. You stop doing something small. You've got a spaza shop. You try to make sure that spaza shop, the suppliers at a lower cost than anybody else. You try to build up a relationship with the suppliers. All of that kind of thing until that spaza shop is quite good, and then you can have a spare parts shop on the side. And in that way, economies grow. They don't get parachuted from the top. My successful students learn the nuts and bolts of the research process, and they go and they do that well, irrespective of their backgrounds. So irrespective of their backgrounds, you get good students, bad students, students who pass, students who fail. So if we look at that as a country, for us to succeed, we need to have these small networks that increase success. And they're not going to suddenly become multi-million rand networks, but they can, in a community, they can be a successful network upon which other networks then grow in different ways and they multiply. That is what Ricardo Hausmann has shown us. It leads to successful countries. And in research that I've done throughout Africa, I've looked at the whole of Africa, cities that have got inclusive growth. It's that factor. It's that factor where it doesn't matter if you get a large company coming in and for an investment. For that country to grow, it's the people that will grow in small ways successfully, and that gets bigger and bigger. I hope that's a point that I can maybe give in this discussion. Thank you.
Great,
Thanks,
that
Lisa.
is useful. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Tessa. A few points that I think the comment about scenario planning and kind of those outcomes around what you said, and interesting related to the riots and looting, because the scenario planning generally follows the route. I mean, if you look at the work from scenario planners Clem Santer, Franz Grenier, and there are a few others that talk about the potential development of enclaves, and that they begin to form these little hubs and eventually get off the grid and all of those type of things, communities that do that. And the assumption is that those are generally more affluent communities. Following the riots and looting, you find communities with almost on par or below average household income level that show exactly the same characteristics of let's protect what we have, let's start building the community from within, and let's develop structures and systems that could sustain that. Now, so there you immediately have something that developed organically out of a need or out of a situation that instigated that need, and it begins to develop, but it falls within the same kind of definition of what it would have been considered otherwise. So I think we need to be open about the flow of which we define ourselves and how we get to the point where we start recognizing what our soft power is in terms of the flag and the kind of symbols that we associate with the proudly South African, those kind of things. Those are soft power images of what it is, and one of them that we quite easily recognize is our diversity and where we came from, and that we're moving towards somewhere. And we pick up on those, but we don't celebrate them as much as we should. We often get stuck in the kind of race attributes or whatever it is that we are that politicians promote, as you said earlier on. So those are the kind of things that I think are necessary for us to recognize at community level, at broader spaces where there are connections between communities showing similar patterns, and to promote that, and to encourage that, and to give energy behind it, because that is the endorsement that those communities need to continue that process. And their success is not just reliant on the success that they achieve, but their success becomes a celebration of similar success stories in other areas of the country. That is, and may even lead to, you know, they had another idea of solving a problem there. That's actually something we can bring here, and we can work with that. So the summary call for me is, the signs are there that they are beginning to form the first steps around an identity. That identity is very much localized and based on the conditions and the circumstances of the communities within which they live, and what their needs and how their relations with one another develop. But what we do need, and I think from a Brand SA point of view, as one of those organizations, is to help foster that through the community programs and networks, and not to do it as a top-down, but to keep that localized feel and to begin to build those networks in a similar way that we have. I mean, we had lots of good discussion today, and we've never met before, and it was actually a very, a very constructive discussion in the sense of how we can do that. And these kind of similar sessions could be held in various places with the same theme. The last point I want to make is that related to retail. Retail is one of our strongest sectors, and it's perhaps the easiest way in which to involve communities and other areas in a form of trade, to get commerce into the community, and to make sure that that stays there, and from there to start building on. So I agree with you, Musi. I think the conversation of, industries and those kind of things, to plug them into communities, the money doesn't necessarily stay there. The money needs to rotate within the community, and that's how that begins to develop. So the idea around, spazas and informal community or informal economy practices and those kind of things, SARS may not like it, but that's how we need to start developing it. Thank you.
Ashraf?
So I'm the last this time round. Let me do that. And I have to return from my leaf of thinking and get switched on once again, right? So first, some just points that were brought up earlier on. You spoke about, collective activism or something like collective purpose, that picking up on some of the things I've said. And yes, I think it is incredibly difficult for people who are poverty-stricken, who just survive, to even sell them ideas of collectivism and nation building. I mean, like, what nonsense is that? What nation building? I just want to survive for the day. I mean, it is incredibly difficult. And we can't, there's no nice way to spin it. You just can't spin it. So we just have to keep shut about that. But what we have to fix up is the systems that perpetuates poverty, because it has. So as a football fan, how can it be that a country that so successfully hosts a 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 football World Cup, right, that can get things so wrong immediately on the back of the World Cup? Whereas it should have been super successful if what was said, it had to be a catalyst for greatness. It didn't quite happen, right? But you also, I think, touched on the point about poverty, a poverty mindset, if I'm not mistaken, right? Now, I mean, this is not my words, but I mean, I've read about things like, shifting poverty mindset to an abundance mindset. And that, I think, is possible, because even in the history of the world, no matter what the adversity that people face, right? If you show them the oasis, so just think of being in the desert. If you show them an oasis, they will reach out for it. It is inherent in nature that no matter what your troubles are, you want better. So when there's a poverty mindset, you can't give them R1 million and say you're not poor anymore, because they don't know how to spend it, right? We know that. But if you can show them that in the midst of poverty, you can reach out for something, and therefore the abundance mindset, so find the oasis, then you may change that. Now, how do you do that? Goes back to all the things that were said from the outset, which is, therefore, it's not about national pride, but national purpose, and therefore not about just championing other causes, but championing your own purpose. And therefore, it is really spending a lot of time investing in human beings, in human capital, in all of us, and talking to each one of us daily. This poverty-stricken person in Halashiwe, wherever he or she may be, is like, but what's your purpose? And to provoke them. And he says, like, my purpose is to do the washing on a Wednesday. But no, that's not the purpose. That's what you have to do to survive. Your purpose has to be greater. So if we can plant that seed on a daily basis with everybody we meet, it's like, what's your purpose? And then throw in the abundance part of the purpose. It will slowly start cascading into something substantial, right? So I think that's very, very possible in my opinion, right? The other parts that were brought up, then the collective, I mean, the collective comes beyond that. I mean, that is why we at Champion South Africa, we spend a lot of time in, interesting, Musi, you brought up the point about thinking and absence of thinking. So we spend a lot of time promoting champion thinking. So champion thinking is abundance thinking. So in the midst of absolute adversity, switch on to championing something or being the best at what you can be, even in the midst of a lower rung. And you never know what may happen, okay? So that's it. Then the collective will come thereafter. I think it's a bit futile, and the Football World Cup has proven that, right? And the Rugby World Cup, we won the World Cup, that you can bring people together fleetingly and celebrate in the most magical ways, right? I mean, it's interesting, George, I mean, I'm assuming you come from a Greek background, right? You know, it's interesting, Greece won the Olympics, the Olympic bid, right? 10 years later, they were a bankrupt nation. So it tells you it's fleeting. So there's this whole catalyst of, the whole world's going to change. It didn't change, okay? Although I love my sport, right? So you can bring people together in short spurts, and therefore we can still do that. Rah-rah and ramble around certain causes. But the real change has got to be to instigate this transaction, if I can borrow from what was said earlier on, about transaction to purpose. So that's the one thing. The other that was spoken about the local, buy local. So, you know, we live in contradictions. I must tell you, I get infuriated every time I see somebody with the I Love New York cap, baseball cap. Like, why? we have, you know, if it's we're not even a baseball nation. I understand you can aspire towards football or cricket or rugby because we have that within us. Like, so you got I Love New York City. And then somebody is inspiring us to buy that. But it infuriates me. But then having said that, then I have no problem wearing a Man United top even when my team's losing dramatically. So there's something, and nobody forces us to. But what it proves is, and the marketers and the branders will understand this, one, it comes from a sense of excellence in terms of what they have, whether it's true or not. And then there is definitely a brand exportation of those brands in terms of the communication that gets us to covet that, to say, but I want that top, or I want that lousy baseball cap, and I will wear that like New York City is my city, right? And I mean, for the record, for those who've been to New York, there's pockets of greatness, there's pockets of incredible poverty in that city, there are huge problems, and we still hold on to it. And if you look at the USA that people love from South Africa, you know, there's amazing excellence, but to quote, I think it was Professor Landsberg, if it was, who said, you know, the problem with the USA, it's a democracy at home, but a dictatorship abroad. So, and yet we still love them. Like, there's something about it. So that means there's mass communication that gets us to buy into it, okay? So that's got to change. On the buy local, and you know, we've chatted about this from a proudly South African point, I've made the point. Yes, I think it's fine to buy local. But I'm not obsessed about buying local. Not at all. Because the problem with that, it perpetuates a whole xenophobic circle. That's problematic. So I'm looking at you, if buying local means not buying something from Lesotho, that's a problem. Like, really, that's the type of barriers I'm not saying don't buy local. We can't build those, we can't be fixated on it, okay? What I have always encourage the buying local, fine. Don't be obsessed, right? But more importantly, buy local, or rather, no, let me rephrase. Build local, because that's very important. Build local and sell global. So by building local and selling global, and the selling global is where we can play a part. So when somebody buys a stupid baseball cap that says, I love New York City, can we then do something, you know, to say, I don't know, I'm looking at Bloom Celtic because they don't exist anymore, but just such a wonderful, you know, white stripe, right? I mean, they have it. It's like, what about, look at how colorful this top is, like, and give it to a cousin or a friend who's out in Germany. And they will start lashing on to that. Now that is the cap, but you can do the same thing with other products. So build local, sell global. Then we'll change the whole narrative of the country, right? There was maybe one other thing that I wanted to just say.
I'm going to come back to you if you're struggling now.
No, I'm fine.
Are you
with
good?
it, yeah. Okay.
All right.
So maybe the last part, because I think you asked like, what now? What can we do, right? So I'll answer that by saying that, I mean, the point you made about the youth, I don't have to repeat it. We've chatted about it before. It is ridiculous that youth and investing in youth is not the number one issue in the country. It's where all the assets lie. Mm-hmm. All the problems and all the assets. But you made the point about BEE. I completely agree with you. BEE is flawed because BEE is narrow economic empowerment, where it was a transferal of wealth from a narrow section of the community, white, to an even narrower section of the community, the political elite, and we're paying the price for that. But we won't debate that longer. It's pretty obvious. That's what the problem is. In terms of the what now, I'll first just give us a narrative, and then I'll give my example. So, I found this very interesting. There are two cities in modern-day Saudi Arabia. One is called Mecca, and the other is called Medina. But I'm going to go back 1,400 years ago. When the people of Mecca, headed by the Prophet Muhammad, propagated their new faith, right? Oh, there's a phone. It's like, maybe you're on the wrong path there. Let me just do that. Sorry. When the people of Mecca promoted this new faith, they were persecuted by their own people. So what did they do? They had to flee Mecca. They were migrants. They packed their bags and moved. Not willingly, they had to flee for their lives. And they fled from Mecca to Medina, which is like Joburg to Durban. Okay? So they fled. And they were housed by the people of Medina. So that was the first part about inviting migrants, which I think is very important fundamentally. The second part of it is the Prophet Muhammad very quickly realized housing the migrants was not going to be enough, because the migrants basically went with nothing. They had no bucks, they had zilch. It was going to cause a problem. And the Madanites, the people of Medina, obviously had wealth, because that's where they were. And he asked the people of Medina to say, can you please share in your wealth? And what happened, I won't say it happened to everybody, but there was a city-wide, it was a city-states those years, right? It was a city-wide campaign to divide your wealth. And they did that. And what that created was this equilibrium, because, you know, you made the point, Tessa, early on. You see, you can be a completely poverty-stricken country worse off than South Africa. But if you're equal and you're poor, you're okay. It's a contradiction, but you don't have the friction, right? So he created an equilibrium, an equality in that society by doing that. Now, why am I saying that? That then sparked off the rise of the city-state, and thenceforth there was major changes around the world based upon that faith, okay? I'm saying that because when I look at what happened in KwaZulu-Natal in particular, forget the political instigators, that's a different conversation. But the seeds of poverty, of absolute poverty, are there. And there's been very little attempts, going back to the BEE story, to address the poverty. That's why we can have 10 years after the World Cup, we can have people traveling 3 hours for water. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So, going forward, when you look at the KwaZulu-Natal example, and you look at the Medina model, my suggestion going forward, where I sit as a South African, invested in the country, as also the founder of Champion South Africa, wanting to build a champion nation, is, can we share in our wealth? Now, I am not suggesting we must give half, because I think nobody's going to do it here. Not at all. And not me. Right? We're too selfish for that. But if we can if we can at least, what's the modern day example of sharing of the wealth? In the old days, it's money. In today's times, it's knowledge, it's skills transfer. So can we, on a one-to-one basis, actively identify people from impoverished communities, right? And I'm not going to use the word adopt because I don't like the word adopt, but if we partner with someone, so, you know, the point that, Musi, you made the point earlier on about, you know, people looking for jobs. It's true. A person who's in Langa, ask them to find, they want to serve articles for law. Ask them to find one cousin to advise them. They won't find one person in the entire community to advise them because there is no lawyers in Langa. It's that type of scenario. Ask me, I can give advice to 10 different lawyers, expose them to someone. We had that social capital. So can we use that social capital to do a skills transfer where we identify people, particularly from impoverished communities, and this is not mentorship, this is active skills transfer. And if we start doing that on a mass scale, we're doing it outside of government, we'll take, it's transactional, as has been said before. We are now making a serious dent in the changes. It's champion thinking, it's shifting people from a poverty mindset to an abundance mindset, to a champion mindset. It's giving people purpose in life, because if you give people purpose in life, then it doesn't matter what it is. When they have purpose, they will wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, not because somebody is whipping them. They have a grander purpose. They just live on another plane, and that's what I would suggest. Thank you.
And that's where we're going to wrap it up today. I think we've had a fruitful conversation that I hope has challenged us all. I think there are 4 things that stood out for me throughout the conversation. The first is that we do need common purpose and common goals. We've had many common problems and many common enemies, but perhaps we need to start looking for a common purpose. But in order for us to get there, both in terms of having a common purpose and meeting it, we are going to need sacrifice. We're going to need to be able to give of ourselves. Somebody said to me a few weeks ago that it takes a lot of leisure and privilege to have the opportunity to sit and talk about issues. To take out 3 hours of your day to talk about things requires privilege. All of us here have a high degree of privilege in South Africa, because there are people for whom 3 hours spent talking is 3 hours less spent feeding their families. And I, Ashraf, want to push against the idea that we just only have to give our social capital and political capital to people. We also need to start giving our resources. We need to start a culture of sharing resources in this country from points of privilege, because that social capital is linked to our resource position. We are able to do those things because of our resource positions. And so I do want to challenge us to start saying, especially as people who are privileged enough to sit and have the conversations, number one, to create spaces, opportunities, and resource bases for other South Africans to be able to take time out of their lives to participate in these conversations. But number two, to stand in the gap economically, politically, socially, to actually transfer our social, political, and resources to other people. I've said to people in civil society recently that those of us in the NGO space who donors and philanthropists are willing to transfer money into our bank accounts because we can afford the accountant that's going to do the recon, maybe it's our chance to pass that on and be the guarantor for the community-based activist who's never going to get that money from philanthropy. We need to start doing that. We need to start standing in the gap for many South Africans who need to be part of not only these conversations, but the actions that we intend to take forward from all of this. And so my final shot, parting shot, is around inclusive action. We talk about inclusive economies, but truly inclusive economies can only come from inclusive action. And we are going to have to break our own bubbles, our own comforts, our own ways of doing things, and realize that it's not going to be the political, social, or economic elites of the country. We're not going to be the Avengers that are going to come together and save us all. No. What we are going to have to do is sacrificially, intentionally, and with purpose, create space, time, effort, and energy so that other people in this country who have been on the margins become part of the mainstream. We need to mainstream marginality People cannot live in the margins and actually be successful. We need to create space so that we ensure that the inclusive South Africa we want actually starts with us. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for your participation. And I hope that it takes forward in many other shapes and forms. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe there are things downstairs. Are there?
I think Ibrahim will say something
great.
to close.
Cool. I may need a mic. There we go.
Okay, it's on, yeah. Okay, nations are very interesting phenomena. The discussion of nations started off, in Europe, all in those back ages, and, we started seeing the formation of these nation states. There was an idea that there was one nation with the same identity, with the same language, the same culture, and eventually they formed the country. And that notion over the past 200-300 years, has altered. We have even in Europe where, this idea came about. Switzerland, for example, has an Italian part, a French part, and a German part. So, in looking at nations, nations can be representative of more than one dynamic, more than one culture, more than one identity. And I think coming out of these discussions is the fact that South Africa as a nation has these different identities. That, yes, we are the country with the highest inequality rate, and we are the country with huge problems, but we also have huge resources and fundamental ideas that can actually work. We weren't asked to mediate in between Russia and Ukraine if we were that bad. Looking at this, and I think I came to this discussion a bit concerned that, the findings seem to point to the fact that, emerging is a social activism, but a localization. And the localization, I thought, would be exclusionary rather than inclusionary. It would be outsiderish rather than insiderish. And, as Jan brilliantly stated in his last point, it's not an income level. It seems as if South Africa, based on our history, based on our past, are actually forming these localized nations. And the trick is actually, and localized communities, the trick seems to be to actually find a way to allow for collaboration between these communities to then move upwards towards forming a nation. Now, the significance of this research is it's 5 years of research, 30,000 interviews, 50 focus groups, 60 in-depth interviews with academics and activists and prominent personalities. This is what South Africans see themselves as. It's not us people, middle class, upper middle class, from certain dynamics who think a certain way. These are what South Africans think about themselves. And herein lies the benefits of such research. It's, despite all our problems, despite the differences, despite the inequalities, there are these 10 segmentation groups or segmented groups that have, quite a bit in common. And that may come from different backgrounds, but actually seem to see solutions in a similar light. And as the research points out, that branding and marketing, you only buy 30 to 40% of the value of a product. I know I got an iPhone here, which is just useless, but you paid a whole lot for it, because it's the intangibles. It's not the tangibles. 30 to 40% of the product is the utility. The other 60% is what's your cultural attitudes, your beliefs, your identity. And the significance of this research shows that South Africans still identify, there's commonalities in how we identify issues and how we respond to issues, how we relate to issues, and how we respond and relate to the South African nation. And the idea is actually to try and ensure that these findings, these ideas, these identities, actually through people like Yomuzi, like your Ashraf, are actually, used to actually foster the formation in the sense of a broader South African identity. An identity that is, able to form to see commonalities, but also respect and respond to diversity. And we can see this if we can, looking at solutions, finding out how to actually twin communities and ensure that you use local bottom-up development models, which can be then responsive to the needs of local populations. And so, we do envisage continuing this research because I think it's very significant and very critical. As Tessa said earlier, South Africa, we seem to go through these junctions and junctures, and this research is, one of the best ways of picking up how we're responding to these junctures and junctures. And I think, as the research points out, Corona may have actually benefited us because it may have actually seemed to re-envisage the fact that communities need the collaborative aspects, the fact that we've become a lot more caring since the pandemic than we were previously. So the research will be continuing, and we would like to have panels like this further and in future. And we also want to thank all the participants, the audience for the brilliant commentary and comments. I've learned a whole lot from this, and all of that wasn't in the research. The panelists, the funeral concept is amazing. You can't pick that up quantitatively. You can only pick it up qualitatively. And research shows a lot, but also we need to speak to people because we also learn even more. And so thanks to the panelists, to Jan, to Prof. Angelopoulos for the brilliant research. I mean, who would think there's that much commonalities in South Africa? But there actually is. And South Africans themselves see it this way, which is amazing. Thanking Muzi and Ashraf for their brilliant inputs, and also for providing some positivity to the discussions and innovative solutions, which I think are necessary. Research is only as good as what we do with it. And so thanks to everyone. Thanks to Tessa for for chairing the session and acting as a facilitator. Your inputs were brilliant as well, and the conversation flowed very well, and the insights were amazing. And so thanks to everyone for coming on the short notice, and Shamiso has some things to give to the participants.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shamisa. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Here you go.